I think those kinds of just introducing those kinds of mechanisms for people to still be social, but not like, okay, there's one other person and I'm going to talk to them and I'm completely stone cold sober and like this is really awkward and I don't know what to say, but kind of give them something to do and sort of like have a side conversation. Like that actually works extremely well. That made me really happy to see that.
Before we get started, just a really quick question. Have you checked out the awesome free stuff available at lownodrinkermagazine.com/free gifts? Well, you should. Hi, Low No Nation, and welcome to this week's conversation on the Low No Drinker podcast, bringing you the people, places, and brands leading the low, no, and light alcohol revolution. This week, I'm very happy to be in conversation with the wonderful Sam Bale. Sam is the founder and tastemaker of Third Place, which is a fantastic pop-up in New York City. She has lived and worked in many places and has her finger on the pulse with the low no drinks industry. So I'm very excited to bend her ear, find out a bit about her story, what she's excited about in the space when it comes to low and no drinks, and also how the whole pop-up non-alcoholic bar scene came about, because that sounds like it probably was a bit of a challenge to begin with. So we'll jump into that. But first of all, Sam, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Denise. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the nice intro. That's really fun.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. I mean, it's all you. I'm just telling people what you've been doing. So. So it does sound really fascinating. Now, obviously, I am based in London and I haven't been to New York for quite some time. So, unfortunately, I've not had the pleasure of going to any of your events myself. But I do know quite a few people on your side of the pond and they speak so very, very highly of all the things that
Aw.
you do. So, I'd love to know what the journey was, Sam. So, start where you want to start. But how did you get to where you are with these bars at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, the journey is very, very long. I'm gonna try and keep it short, but basically, I am from Germany originally. And as you might know, the legal age for drinking in Germany is 16. So I was allowed to have beer and wine, go to the pub when I was 16. So I was always, a drinker, an enthusiastic drinker. That continued throughout college, and then I was actually in grad school in Manchester in England for 5 years. Was a regular at the local pub, obviously, and kind of took that also to New York City. In New York City, I started working for a startup with like a little bit of a work hard, play hard kind of culture. Really, what you'd imagine. Like we had a kegerator in your office, and any meeting after 5 p.m. was a beer meeting.
Yeah.
And yeah, after 20 years of basically drinking consistently, I always said it wasn't a big problem for me necessarily, but it definitely did cause me some problems. All the hangovers and the drunk arguments and like the stupid stuff you do when you drink.
Yeah.
I kind of realized that I was, especially after 2 years of COVID and sort of early mid 2022, I realized I was just constantly going out and drinking, just to be around people, and the drinking really wasn't fun anymore. It just felt like, it almost felt like a chore. I was just going to a bar, and at some point, it was Monday night. I was on my second or third tequila soda, and I'm like, I don't want this drink. I want to be around people, but the drinking is just sort of like grinding me down at this point. So I had the idea of actually starting an alcohol-free bar, like a brick and mortar, full-on just bar that felt like a regular bar, just without alcohol. Because I realized there's none of those kind of spaces out there that are open late, where you can just hang out. You maybe know the bartender, the regulars, and you don't have to necessarily engage in an activity. You don't have to run or climb or talk about books or knit or whatever it is that you do in all these clubs, right? um, and I just wanted to have a place that felt like a bar, so I had the idea of starting Third Place Bar, hence the name, sort of, for the bar in there. And just because I didn't want to necessarily dive right in and pay rent in New York City. We talked about like the issue of
Yeah.
rent and costs in New York City. I started hosting pop-up events just to kind of test the waters, understand the hospitality industry, understand the world of low and no drinks. I'll also understand my potential customers, understand sobriety. And I kind of just get stuck with the pop-up events because I realized they give me a lot of flexibility. I can do different things. I don't have to worry about covering running
Mhm.
costs and rent. I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about making, 5,000 plus dollars a month just to keep the lights on. And that's just a rent. Like there's infinitely more
Yeah.
stuff you'd have to consider. So yeah, I've been doing that since late 2022. Kind of started my first series of regular pop-ups in dry January 2023. So just had my official 2-year anniversary, and yeah, I've just been hosting lots of different types of fun events. I've done trivia nights, I've done non-alcoholic cocktail mixology classes. I did a non-alcoholic wine tasting for Valentine's Day last year. I've done movie nights. I'm hosting a wellness and mental health kind of fireside chat in a few weeks. So pretty much anything that I would say people would do to go out, to have fun, to connect with other people. And there's just no alcohol. There's just non-alcoholic drinks instead. And that's kind of the idea of Third Place Bar, is really providing that kind of third space where people can connect and they can socialize just without alcohol.
I think, first of all, I think that sounds wonderful. And I like that you came at it with the approach of, you don't have to, like you said, go rock climbing. You don't have to knit. You don't have to talk about books. You could just go and hang out because, when you go to the pub, as you will well know, spending 5 years in Manchester, you don't go there necessarily to go and do an activity. You go there to spend some time with your friends. And yes, the goal for many people is to go and, drink loads of booze. But you're so right. You had said something that really hit with me, which was that you were drinking your, tequila and soda and just like, do I really want another one? And it's that feeling of drinking just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that got me. I was like holding a drink in my hand. I was like, I don't actually want this. Like,
Yeah.
what's the point?
Yeah. And you have that a lot, right? Like think of just like going to the pub
Yeah.
and you're on your whatever third, fourth beer. At some point, like very often, like even if you're having a good time, you're like, oh, I don't want to drink anymore, but I still want to stay in the space. So I feel like I should be drinking, or I should have like buy something, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a bigger conversation to be had about just alcohol free, yeah, third spaces or alcohol free spaces that are open late in general. I actually talked about that with a friend just a few days ago, where he said, yeah, is it weird because we have sober bars in New York City now? We have a couple of alcohol free bars. And he said, would it be really weird if I had a drink and then went to a sober bar? And I said, at first I was like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And then I realized, hang on, a lot of times when you go out and you go to a pub, you go to a bar, or maybe even a restaurant, and you have a couple of drinks,
Yeah.
you want to stay out, right? You don't want to go home yet, and you don't want to just be home alone or whatever it is, but you don't necessarily want to keep drinking. So I said, actually, if you've had a couple of drinks and then you go to a sober bar, to an alcohol free bar, and have non-alcoholic drinks, because it's just a lot easier to pick non-alcoholic
Yeah.
drinks
Yeah.
if there's just no alcohol at all, and usually the selection is a lot better, right? Like that's actually really great. Like I feel like that's something that we don't even talk about, that I mean we do with like the whole thing about zebra striping and stuff, but like even just the benefit of alcohol free spaces for people who may have even had a drink or two that same night and then want to be in an alcohol free space, so they don't feel like they should continue drinking, and it just makes it a lot easier to not consume alcohol. So I think there's like so much more to explore, and so much more to kind of build when it comes to alcohol free yeah, bars, pubs, late night cafes, late night coffee shops and stuff, even for people who may have had a drink or a few that night, just to have those spaces to be with people.
I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was that whole third space moniker. So you've pretty much touched on it, but it was a term that, or it is a term rather, that I hadn't come across
Mm.
before I started sort of immersing myself in this world. So I should imagine that I'm not that special. So there must be other people that think the same as me who've not heard the term before. What does the term third space mean to you when you're talking to people about it? How do you describe it?
Yeah, I'm not that educated. I didn't know that's basic. I mean, my focus is in computer science. Sociology is not necessarily my strength, and my focus in my education. So I also didn't hear the term until I kind of started doing research
Yeah.
into, what would then become third place bar. My initial name for the bar was Why Not Bar or Why Not Cafe. I kind of
Okay.
wanted, like, it's alcohol free. Why not?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Um, so the idea of a third space, the term was coined by sociologist Ray Oldenburg in the 1980s. So actually, like, fairly recent, I guess. And he basically said that most people have several spaces in their lives where they have social connections. Usually, your first space is your home, your second space is work or school, and then your third space is any space outside of home or work where you have other social connections. And the he said the hallmarks of a third space is it's accessible. You don't necessarily need to have a membership or pay anything in order to access the space. He didn't say it has to be free. It could be a commercial space. So the name of the book is actually, I always butcher. It's like cafes, salons, restaurants, and bars, something like that. So he
Okay.
explicitly lists commercial spaces as third spaces. But he basically said the idea is they're fairly accessible. You don't have to like pay a membership or anything in order to get there. Um, they have regulars. That's actually one of the biggest hallmark of the
Okay.
third space. They have people who are there on a regular basis, who you kind of, you recognize, and it forms a form of community. It forms some kind of community, right? The people at your local pub, um, you know them. You
Yeah,
walk in,
yeah.
you know the bartender, you know the regulars, and that is kind of a third space. I think one of the best examples, funny enough, is the Banshees of Inversion. I think the movie with Colin Farrell that came out a couple years
Okay.
ago, that's set on like a tiny island off of the coast of Ireland,
Okay.
and everything important in that movie basically happens at the local pub.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone always goes to the local pub to see, like, is that guy here? Is that guy here? They talk to the bartender or landlord of the pub. He has all the information, like he knows everything that's going on, and that's kind of sort of the idea of the public house,
Yeah.
which is where the term pub comes from, which is literally just a space where
Yeah.
people would come together. And yeah, that's the idea of a third space. And like I said, I think we are definitely, starting to see a decline in third spaces, I would say, especially free third spaces. If you think about it, the only true free third space that is indoors, that's not just like a park, are libraries.
Mhm.
Libraries are the only true third spaces that are not commercial, where you can literally just walk in and sit there and no one expects you to buy anything. But in terms of, anything that's open late, there's it's bars, it's pubs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're completely right. I mean, I'm sure you remember when you were here. We have our soap operas. You have soap operas in the States as well. We watch big shows here like Coronation Street or EastEnders, or they all center around a pub. That is where
Uh,
everything happens, and then there might also be a cafe, and those are the two places where all the things. So just like you were saying in that movie, um, and I think now that I think it's accepted now. The world has come to recognize that generally we are drinking less, and that particularly the younger generation, who are going to be the older generation, are looking for spaces where they can do things that don't revolve around drinking. It now becomes essential that these third spaces actually grow and progress to suit the needs of the people, because without that, we will be left with dwindling pubs and dwindling bars.
mhm.
And if they can't adapt and they can't recognize that there is opportunity elsewhere, and I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because, people are so used to just going to the pub or just going to
Yeah.
the bar that they find it hard to accept that things need to look a little
Mhm.
bit different, and that they need to change to facilitate what it is that people
Mhm.
actually want.
Yeah. And it is different. It is difficult. So one of the reasons why I haven't done the non-alc bar thing yet is because um the concept of an alcohol-free bar is really, it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. Even people who don't drink say, like,
Hmm.
why would I go to a bar if I don't drink? So as much as I think pubs need to adapt to people who don't drink or drink less. I think once you're sort of maybe in a group of friends where no one drinks,
Mm.
they're also not going to go to a pub. I think the pub still exists because there are still enough people who drink, and friend groups or partners, whatever, husband and wife, and all that, co-workers. There's always going to be some people who do drink. So because it's a mixed group, having non-alcoholic options or low and no options at pubs is super helpful because that caters to everyone. But as soon as people decide to just not drink at all, I feel like, at least like in the conversations I've had, there is a barrier to going to a bar or a pub if no one
Mm.
drinks, because it's like, what's the point? So actually last night I was at a late night tea house, coffee shop. There's a couple of those in New York City called Kawa House, and it was packed. It was
Oh yeah.
9:30 on a Friday, on a Monday night, and it was there. It was hard to find a seat. I got like one
Wow.
seat, like a high top, by the windows, but the place was bumping. I mean, granted, it's like in a very very popular and like busy neighborhood, Williamsburg. It's on the main street in Williamsburg, really close to the subway, so it's in like a prime location too. But to me, that just shows that people are looking for something that's a late night,
Yeah.
space that isn't necessarily a bar, and also doesn't necessarily pretend to be a bar by being an alcohol free bar. But if you remove the association with like bar drinking, people want to go to late night spaces. Like they
Yes.
want to go out and be with people, even just to like to study or maybe get away from your roommates. New York City, everyone has roommates because we can't afford to rent our own apartments, or to go on a date or go and catch up with friends, right? There's so many reasons why you might want to be out of the house at 9 o'clock on a Monday night. And yeah, you don't necessarily want to be at a bar or anything that even resembles a bar, because it's like, why would I be there if I don't drink? Right? It
Yeah.
feels a little silly. Um, so yeah, I'm a firm believer actually in the late night coffee shops and late night tea houses, and I feel like that's going to have a big renaissance over the next few years, at least here in New York City.
That
That's my bet.
Yeah, that I mean, we don't have a lot in the UK of that type. We've got a couple of there's a bar in some major cities. Every major city's got like one bar or something. We've got like Club Soda in London, and you've got Hinterland, and these places are trying, and they're coming up. But I think it's so true what you say about wanting a space to get away but still have an adult time. Like I've got two small kids, and I want to go out and I want to meet my friends, and I love my kids dearly, but I want to get away from them sometimes and go and hang out with other adults, and maybe friends who I've had for a long time, or we used to party together. But the
Mhm.
idea of going into a bar that's really loud, and I
Yeah,
can't find a seat,
exactly.
and there are drunk people spilling their drinks on me.
Yeah,
I want to go somewhere where I can still have that sort of the right vibe and the right environment, but in a much more comfortable space where I
yeah.
know that it's going to be full of like-minded adults. And
Mhm.
and for those times when I am with a group of friends who do want to drink alcohol, I've got no issue in going into a bar,
Yeah,
particularly because
exactly.
I'm not coming from a recovery perspective, so it's
Yeah,
fine for me. But think about those people who are in a position where they just don't want to be around alcohol
yeah,
and
yeah,
drinkers. Um, so let's circle back a bit more to you in particular, and what
mhm,
you've been doing. So tell me a little bit about the events that you've been putting on, because I was spying on your LinkedIn and such, and having a look through your sort of back catalogue of what you've been up to, and you
yeah.
really do quite a range of different types of events. So tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah, initially Third Place Bar started out really just as a pop-up bar. So I would take over a coffee shop on a Friday night after 5 o'clock from 5 to 10, and then just open it up and run it as a bar and just have non-alcoholic drinks there. I had a bartender, I played music, I dimmed the lights. And it was really funny because I thought like this is exactly what I want and this is exactly what everyone else wants. And people didn't really know what to do with themselves there. It was so funny because it's like a bar, so you just sit here. So as soon as you like take the alcohol out of it, it's kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? And so I kind of switched a little bit more to like an activity model, which is funny because I literally just said like I don't want to necessarily want have people do activities, but it turns out for alcohol-free spaces, funny enough, like a lot of times, especially people who come by themselves, like having some kind of activity is
Makes sense.
just makes for a much better experience. And a lot of the people who come to my events do come by themselves. I'd say like 60-70% probably come alone, because sometimes they're the only person in their group of friends who doesn't drink or drinks less and wants to, just experience something else. So it's really interesting, which means that as the person who hosts those events, I need to adapt to that, right?
Mhm.
And see, okay, what is something that people who come by themselves would find non-threatening, not like intimidating, but also at the same time fun and engaging and helps them make a connection. So I started doing trivia nights. The trivia nights are always really fun, and for that I would like pair people up with other, like with teams. I did, like I said, I did movie nights, I did cocktail classes. Sometimes I do just social mixers, but they always have some kind of, icebreaker component or some sort of activity around it. And yeah, it's just something to get people engaged and really make for a better experience. Just to kind of acknowledge that for a lot of people it is weird and awkward and maybe a little intimidating to go to an alcohol free event by themselves.
I hear that a lot from people I've spoken to who run alcohol-free events. So for example, there's a clubbing event that happens here in London, and the guys that run that, they're doing really well, and people love coming. But they found that lots of people were coming by themselves because, just as you
Mhm.
say, a lot of people might be the only person in their group that's decided to make this go on this journey to drinking less. And so they started introducing, like, so the club, it's a daytime clubbing event. So say it was on
Mhm.
from 2 till 4. At 12 o'clock, they introduce a 2 hour sort of mixer, just get to know each
Mhm.
other, come on down. So I can totally see that having an activity of some sort that's not too forced, it's not too stressful, it's
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
too, it doesn't demand too much, but it just gives you an excuse to step out of thinking about yourself and going,
Yeah. Yeah.
where should I stand? What should I do? Who should I talk to? And just go, all right, let me think about this, and let my hair down and enjoy myself.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I'm just learning all these things too as an event organizer. My background is in computer science. Like, I'm not a hospitality person. I bartended in Manchester. Many of the UK listeners remember Saki Bar near Whitworth Park. That was me at some point in the middle of the night bartending at like 3 in the morning. And yeah, I've bartended. I've worked at a pizza place, but I've never, been. And I've hosted. I actually hosted events in Manchester too. I had a nonprofit called Manchester Girl Geeks, where we had girl geek tea parties in the afternoon. But that was all. That was all activity based. So those were more almost like workshops where we would teach people to code, and we would do soldering classes, and we would do
Cool.
show and tells and everything. Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was really great. And so it's just a lot of like activity based stuff. So the whole sort of starting, like, forming a community and having like light activities, especially for adults, that's pretty new to me, and I had to figure all that out. One thing that I find really interesting is I introduced the concept of parallel play to my event. So if you have kids, you might have heard of that. So kids do something called parallel play, where they play next to each other, maybe even using like completely different toys or different whatever it is, and they might maybe talk to each other and stuff, but they're not necessarily playing together. They're not like building a Lego set together or playing Barbies together, but they kind of play by themselves, but next to each other. And so I introduced that concept by having a nail sticker bar. It's very specific, but it's little just stickers that you can put on your nails. And you basically have a bunch of sheets. You go through the sheets. You use little tweezers. You stick the nail stickers on your nails. You can use a nail polish if you want. And it's a really interesting like form of parallel play, because people will sit next to each other and maybe be like, oh, this is cute, or oh, could you pass me this, right? There's a little bit of interaction, but it's also really good for people who are maybe a little overstimulated and just want a kind of a timeout without being antisocial and sitting on their phone, to do something that they can sort of focus on by themselves, but still be around people and still have a little bit of a chat going on. And it was actually really beautiful for me to see at the first time I did it at an event. I put it on like a big round table, put the nail stickers there. And at some point I came over and there were like four people sitting there kind of doing their own thing, but I could hear them chatting with each other without being like full frontal one-on-one conversation, right? And I think those kinds of, just introducing those kinds of mechanisms for people to still be social, but not like, okay, there's one other person and I'm going to talk to them and I'm completely stone cold sober
Yeah.
and like this is really awkward and I don't know what to say, but kind of give them something to do and sort of like have a side conversation. Like that actually works extremely well. That made me really happy to see that. And you know, the vibes were vibing there. Like people seemed pretty happy with that. It was really cute. Yeah.
That's genius. That's genius. Because you know what that does? That skips out small talk. And that's
Yeah.
it. Small talk, I think, actually kills conversations. You know, as soon as you start talking about the weather or, where are you from? And you sort of, okay, the conversation isn't going anywhere. But if you've already got something else that you can jump into and you're like, okay, if I want to talk a bit more, I can do, but if I'm not, I can carry on what I'm doing. And I love that because I've discovered I'm quite an introvert.
Mm,
As I've aged and as I've reduced my alcohol, I've realized that I'm quite an introvert. So I would love something like that where I could just do my thing. And then if I feel like branching out,
mm.
then that opportunity is there, but you're not forced to.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And it really reminds me of just like very almost like traditional settings, like in home or other communities where, for example, both men and women actually would do some kind of craft next to each other, right? Like I just imagine it was Chinese or Lunar New Year just now, like dumpling making, right? They're like the whole family or a bunch of people are making dumplings. Like you're making something, you're crafting something, and you're sort of having a conversation, but it's not full on just sitting and having conversation. And again, like for a lot of people, they come by themselves. Maybe it's their first time going to an event without alcohol. They might be like, you know, not sure what to expect. So kind of helping them ease in, and they might discover that they are actually more introverted than they thought when they don't drink, right? So helping them ease into those kinds of conversations or kinds of situations is actually super important. So yeah, it's all stuff that I've learned over the last couple of years, and I'm really excited every time I try out something new and it works. And yes, to anyone who listens who comes to third place bar events, like I'm constantly experimenting. You're all my guinea pigs, and I'm constantly like trying to figure out like better formats for events that where people really feel like, oh, this was valuable, this was great, and I'm taking something away from that.
So where are you hosting these events? Like, how do you choose where you're going to host a pop-up, or are people reaching out to you and saying, come and do something in, I've got a gallery space or something? How does that all come about?
In the beginning, I like I said, I rented out coffee shops basically after
Mm.
hours, which is pretty fun, because you know it's an alcohol-free space. I've had some events at regular bars, but they're always really weird because there's always alcohol on the back bar and you're kind of serving non-alcoholic drinks and sort of pretending that there's no alcohol in the room. So fortunately in New York City we have, well, at least until last September, we actually had three alcohol-free bars here in my neighborhood, and I just started hosting events there. I,
Oh,
I
great.
hosted events at No More Cafe, Hecate, Rent Money Lounge, and that was really cool because I basically, like I said in the beginning, I didn't necessarily want to do the thing and like pay rent in New York City and everything. But by hosting events at those spaces, I can bring business to them and I can bring awareness to them and I can, you know, show people that this exists. So it's sort of like a symbiosis, like a mutually beneficial relationship where, to be fair, they're taking on the risk and the rent and everything, and I bring in people for the events and for the parties, which is really cool. And then also, yeah, like I have other people reach out with spaces. I am a member of a community space slash co-working space. It's called Fabric. There was actually a Fabric location in London too. Unfortunately, they closed last year, but they allow me to host events there too, and I don't have to pay, which is really the biggest thing. Because usually, if I have to pay a venue rental, it's I can just about break even, especially again in New York City. It's so expensive. So yeah, I got lucky, but I am definitely gravitating towards finding alcohol free spaces because it just, again,
Makes
it
more
takes
sense.
alcohol out of the equation and it makes it not weird for people, and it makes it a lot friendlier for people who are in recovery to not have them come to a bar where there's alcohol on the shelves.
Okay, makes perfect sense. So, so people are coming to these events? There are some parallel play, your genius discovery. You've got all sorts of different sorts of things going on. But this podcast is all about the drinks. So, tell me, what are people drinking when they're coming to your event? What are they finding? Is it sort of your RTDs, you're ready to go? Are you making cocktails? Because obviously you've got quite a skilled knowledge in cocktail making and stuff. So tell me what people are drinking when they come along to one of the third place events.
It's usually a mix depending on the event. So I have some events where, for example, at Fabric, at the co-working space that I'm at, it feels like a loft.
Okay.
It's just like big loft at Tribeca with like a few tables and couches and stuff. And for events there, for all the social mixers, I usually just have ready to drinks. I have beer, sparkling wine, cups for people to maybe serve themselves, and ready to drink cocktails because it feels a little bit like a house party, like a
Okay.
loft party. So having someone just like grab a can or pour themselves a drink is sort of a lot, it sort of matches the vibe.
Mm.
And then at other events, when I hosted at Hecate, for example, No More Cafe, the Sobo bars, they have a full on cocktail menu, which is absolutely phenomenal. They have really, really great huge selections of non-alcoholic drinks. The back bar at Hecate is just a dream. It looks like the back bar at like Club Soda and stuff, right? It's really, really cool. And then yeah, and then sometimes I do events, like I said, at regular bars, where we usually have like a specials menu with like three, four, five non-alcoholic cocktails too. And I always try and mix it up. I always try and do a nice mix of the citrus forward, slightly fruity cocktails. Maybe I always try and have at least one quote unquote spirit forward drink on the menu because I feel like most people don't get that at other bars. Like if you look at sort of the landscape of non-alcoholic cocktails, even bars, pubs that have decent non-alcoholic cocktails, there's two things you usually find. They're usually, and I'm not talking about like mocktails and stuff that are just juice, but even the ones that use non-alcoholic spirits, they're usually juice or fruit based, or citrus based, and they're usually highball, so they're usually carbonated.
Okay.
Because as we know, carbonation gives a mouthfeel. Because as we know, citrus and juice like gives texture and it gives flavor and everything. But the spirit forward drinks for regular drinkers who like their Manhattans, their Negronis, their old fashioned, super popular drinks, maybe a martini, but I don't think we're there yet with a non-alcoholic martini. But I think at least like the Negronis, the non-alcoholic Negronis are pretty solid at this point. Um, I always try and have like a quote unquote spirit forward drink on the menu in order to show people that it is possible to have a stiff drink that's not just citrus and ginger beer and whatever shaken up. Again, even with non-alcoholic spirits, I think there's a little bit of a tendency to go citrusy or fruity just because it's easy.
Yeah, I think spirits are an interesting one in the non-alc space because a spirit is usually used in a cocktail. People are very rarely drinking spirit straight up, even if you're drinking full strength alcohol. So they have that addition of that mixer, whether it be something sweet or something citrusy or something sour. But there's still that balance that we need to bring. And I think that if someone goes from drinking a full strength alcoholic spirit drink and then expecting the non-alcoholic one to taste exactly the same, obviously they're going to taste different. 40% of that drink is different to what it was beforehand. So I think it's really important that you do that and you do have these spirit forward cocktails on there, that are put together by people who know what they're doing and can really get the best out of these drinks, because there are some amazing concoctions and
Yeah.
recipes that can be made out there, but it does take a little bit of time, right, with spirits to
Mhm.
get your head around how to use them best in a non-alc space.
Definitely, yeah. And again, like if you're shaking something up with citrus, grapefruit, lemon, lime, whatever it is, like that side is like, I feel like it's almost hard to make a bad drink with that, especially if you stick to like quote unquote classic recipes. Like making a non-alcoholic margarita at this point is pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
right? Even if you don't really know what you're doing, like it's hard to get that wrong. It's just gonna probably gonna taste good if it's balanced,
Yeah.
if you follow the instructions. For the spirit forward drinks in particular, I think the texture is really difficult. Like most of the time they're going to taste pretty decent. Like let's say you just had Pathfinder launch in the UK, I think.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a Pathfinder, some non-alcoholic whiskey, for example, and a non-alcoholic vermouth or a non-alcoholic aperitif. Those will taste good, but they will be a little watery still, right? So now the question is, okay, how can I make this drink? How can I give it texture? How can I give it weight and body? And that's where you have to start experimenting with things like gum syrup, for example, or I don't know if you saw this like a while ago, the whole like stirring your drink over sushi rice to give it texture, right? And like it's not too crazy. Like it actually starch makes like adds viscosity, right? So there's just a lot of techniques. So we're also like not diluting it too much. So my preference, for example, for especially for spirit forward drinks, is to batch the drink without ice,
Mhm.
put it in the fridge, cool it down, and then just serve it over a large ice cube, because that way you're not stirring it to cool it down, but you have it already
Yeah.
chilled, and then you pour it over ice. So you're basically not diluting it at all, because all the ingredients in a non-alcoholic spirit or in a non-alcoholic spirit forward drink,
Mhm.
they are they don't really need dilution. I would
No.
say like dilution is our enemy for non-alcoholic drinks. So yeah, there's just like a few techniques to kind of consider, to especially for the spirit forward drinks, to make a drink that also has like a good mouthfeel. I feel like with taste, honestly, like we can make tasty things at this point, no problem.
Absolutely, absolutely, and
It,
there are some great people in our space who are working really hard to help us create. They're experimenting with cocktails, they're experimenting with ingredients, they're putting things together and sharing what they know.
yeah.
The sushi rice thing that you mentioned, I did see that. Was that a discovery of Derek Brown who came
The
up with
so I
that?
think the sushi rice thing was either Punch or Imbibe, one of like the
Oh,
big sort of industry publications, and it was like you need to stir your Negroni over sushi rice. And then Derek, I think, went and actually tried it out with a non-alc drink. So
okay,
so yes, it was definitely Derek definitely tried it out, but I think it originally came from one of the like spirit
okay.
publications. Yeah.
For anyone who may not know, so Derek Brown is an award-winning cocktail bartender turned non-alcoholic pioneer who is doing some amazing stuff. And actually, he's part of something that you were part of earlier on, or a couple months ago as well, right? Which is the Mindful Drinking Fest.
Mindful Drinking Fest. Yeah, that was actually less than a month ago. That was
Oh, was
in January too. Yeah, just to make dry January even busier for all of us.
it?
Yeah, I went to Mindful Drinking Fest in DC. It's a huge expo festival. Anything around mindful drinking. That's both aimed a little bit at industry and the general public, and it's a really fun. I call it like a big school reunion for non-alc industry, sober Coachella, whatever you want to call it. It's really fun.
It sounds fantastic. I'm hoping to be able to make it there one day. There's so many people that I know that go and do great stuff there, and either just sort of speak or they go and learn and they go and enjoy. And it does look like a bit of a school reunion. Every time I've seen pictures that various people that I know have gone there and they post, and they're just everyone's just hanging out, and it's amazing because it does look exactly like you would expect any sort of festival or gathering of people in the same industry around drinks to be there. Everyone's got their arms around each other. Everyone's cheersing, having a
So much
great time.
hugging, so much hugging.
So much hugging. But then
Hugs.
everyone wakes up hangover free in the morning. I mean, it just looks perfect.
Yeah. It's actually my dream, honestly. I, like I said, I worked in, my background is computer science. I worked in tech for 10 years, and usually a lot of like industry conferences are always like booze fests,
Yeah.
right? And it's almost like expected. Like you have the expo day, and then at night you go out and party, and then you get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and go back to like all the talks and the conferences. And it's a nightmare. And I don't know who thought that was a good idea. And the thing I really appreciate about something like Mindful Drinking Fest is that, you still stay out late, but you don't drink, and that's perfectly, it's not just accepted, but it's, enabled, I guess, to not drink. And I think that's wonderful. Like that's honestly like the only kind of industry conference that I want to attend, is where I don't have to, I don't know, mingle at 10:30 with very drunk people slurring
Yeah.
and whatever it is, right? But like everyone's sober. People do get silly. There's karaoke. There's a dance party. It gets pretty wild, and it gets really fun. But also everyone is sober and has their, excuse me, like shit together. And then you wake up the next morning and everyone feels great. And I love that. I think, even just from a professional perspective, from like a work perspective, it makes so much more sense than if everyone get just drunk.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring you back round to third place because it sounds fantastic, and I want people who are listening or watching to know where they can go and find out a bit more about the pop-ups and about you, because I know that you not only put on the pop-ups, but you do sort of cocktail masterclasses, you do some corporate work as well. So tell me, who is that for? Who would really benefit from getting in contact with you, and how do they get in contact with you, Sam?
Yeah, so for any of the events that I host for the general public, usually just my Instagram, there's always a pinned post, there's always a story highlight, there's always the link in bio with all my upcoming events at Third Place Bar NYC. Just one word, Third Place Bar NYC. The third is spelled out, THIRD. And then for any of the corporate events, I also host cocktail mixology classes and tasting. So alcohol for beverage tasting, wine tasting, beer tasting, spirit, or all of it together, mixed tastings for corporate clients as like team building activities, for example. I did a ton of those in January. It was lovely. I was at, so a lot of financial industry and law firms. They like
Ooh.
to, get some alcohol free alternatives in. And for that also, I'd say my website has my email address, so thirdplacebar.nyc, or really just Google for Third Place Bar NYC, and you can contact me. And I always love hearing, especially from corporate clients too, because again, my background is sort of in corporate startups, work hard, play hard. And I think bringing a little bit more non-alc and mindful drinking and low and no to sort of corporate environments is always really fun and really beneficial and really eye-opening for a lot of people.
Bringing a little balance to it
Yeah,
all.
exactly. Bringing a little balance, bringing a little bit of like, hey, look, there's other cool stuff out there.
Fantastic. Before I let you go, Sam, it's time for my last question, my now infamous, because I say so, barbecue question. So I know that in New York, your weather patterns are slightly similar to ours. So I'm guessing it's not very warm there at the moment. So cast your mind forward to a nice sunny day and imagine you're off to a barbecue at a friend's house and you're bringing some drinks along for you and your friends to enjoy. I know this might be hard for you because you work with a lot of brands, a lot of products, but give me a couple of drinks that you like to enjoy in the low no space.
Okay, so specifically, I'm picturing the barbecue right now.
Go for it.
I would bring the Best Day. Best Day. I don't know if it's available in the UK. It's, I think, the second biggest non-alcoholic beer brand after Athletic Brewing in the US, at least. They're based in California. Phenomenal beers. They started out with only three SKUs, and hazy IPA, West Coast IPA, and a Kölsch, and they're all phenomenal. They're all excellent. And now they added three more, another IPA, and they call it Electro Lime, which is kind of like think like a Corona with lime.
Okay.
Super delicious. And my favorite, which is the one I would bring, which I was obsessed with last summer, the Yuzu Ginger Shandy. It is absolutely delicious. And I love speaking to people from the UK because everyone knows what a shandy is. In the US, sometimes I have to explain. I was like, you don't know what
Really?
a shandy is? Like, it's the best thing ever. So they use a ginger shandy. It's not super sweet. I don't really taste the ginger that much. I mostly just it's a delicious yuzu like citrusy shandy. It's so good. So that one I would definitely bring. And then the other one, I would always just bring a bottle of Pathfinder, so non-alcoholic Amaro, just because it's the one-stop shop for good drinks. You can do shots, you can just pour it over ice, sip it neat. You can serve it just with club soda and an orange twist. There's just so many amazing options, like so many things you can do with Pathfinder. And honestly, like all my friends who do still drink, they also love Pathfinder. It's just universally beloved. So I would definitely bring that too.
Amazing selections. And you're right, you mentioned Edinburgh Pathfinder have just launched in the UK. In fact, I spoke to Rish on the show with
Yeah.
last week's episode, which
Oh,
was
amazing.
very, very interesting. He opened the show by saying that actually he finds that most non-alc drinks are quite boring, which made for a very interesting conversation. So it was absolutely fascinating. And that beer, Best Days, did you say? Oh my God.
Best day. Yeah.
Oh,
Best day.
ginger and yuzu. Yeah, I'm there.
So good. It's so good. Again, like the ginger is pretty subtle, but like it's just a phenomenal shandy. It's so good. Also funny to hear about is Risha, is he based in Manchester? I think he's actually
I
based
think
or is he
so.
based in London? Yeah, I think he's based in Manchester. I think they did or at least like they did a launch there. So I'm really excited next time I visit the UK, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. I'm really, really hoping that I can cross paths with the Pathfinder guys because they know how to party.
Yeah.
They're the most fun people. And I can see them saying that most NA drinks are boring because the Pathfinder, the drink itself, just the brand, it's all about fun.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate them for that. So I'm really excited actually to come to the UK and check out the Pathfinder situation there and hopefully meet their reps there. Yeah.
Good, good, good. Well, I will. First of all, I will link to all of your links, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, and such. Everything you mentioned in the show notes for anyone who wants to go and check out the fantastic work that Sam is up to. I would like to reach out for anything that might be suitable for them or their teams, or just want to go out for a lovely night out and meet some like-minded people. And I'll also link to that episode with Rish down below, so everyone can go and check out his reasonings for thinking that non-alc is boring. But Sam, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on because
Thank you.
it's really lovely to speak to people who are in this industry but from a different perspective. I speak to a lot of brand founders, and it's actually lovely to hear about those drinks then being used in real life situations to help people live a life less intoxicated on their own terms. And I appreciate people like you who have that approach of, look, I'm just trying to facilitate these opportunities for people
Mhm.
and allowing them, as I say, to live a life less intoxicated. So thank you very much for your time, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me.